I am 69 years old, and yesterday I buried my wife. The hotel had given us a private lounge off the main ballroom for the reception, one of those soft, dim rooms with low lamps and expensive silence. The kind of place where grief is supposed to look tasteful. People were still drifting in and out, carrying half-empty coffee cups and plates smeared with the last of the finger sandwiches. A server in a black vest moved quietly between the clusters of mourners, collecting used glasses, eyes down as if he was afraid to bump into anyone's sadness. I stood at the far end of the room, by the fireplace, staring at a blown-up photograph of Margaret on an easel. It was from our 35th anniversary. The photographer had caught her mid-laugh, head tilted back, eyes almost closed. Every time I looked at it, my chest hurt in a way no medicine could touch. She was the public face of Lawson Heritage Foods. That's what the papers always called her. The Lawson matriarch. The queen of small batch sauces. They never mentioned that I was the one who installed the kettles she stirred, or welded the rails the cans rolled along. They saw her on television, charming the hosts, and assumed I was just the quiet man in the background. I didn't mind. I loved watching her shine. She was the one who could walk into a grocery chain headquarters with nothing but a tray of samples and walk out with a distribution deal. I was the grease under the fingernails and the ink on the invoices. She was the smile on the label. Someone cleared their throat behind me. I thought it would be one of Margaret's book club friends, or maybe Pastor Hughes, come to tell me how beautiful the service had been. I turned, already forcing my face into the polite mask of the newly widowed. It was Trevor. He was still in his funeral suit, but the tie was loose and his collar was open, like the formality had started to choke him the moment the limo left the cemetery. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand. Top shelf. I could smell it from 3 feet away, and there were 2 young men in slim suits hanging just behind his shoulder. I recognized one from the office, some digital strategy hire he'd pushed for last year. The other was a stranger, hair slicked back, eyes already bright with curiosity. "Ed," Trevor said, and there was no weight in his voice, no softness. Just my name, like a line item on a spreadsheet. "Trevor," I answered. "You holding up?" He didn't bother with small talk. Instead, he let a black leather portfolio slide from under his arm and drop onto the low table by the sofa. Then he lifted a plain cardboard file box I hadn't noticed he was carrying and let that fall at my feet. It landed with a dull thud, heavy with something more than paper. "Thought I'd save us all some time," he said. "Board met this morning. I'm confirmed as CEO, effective immediately. Your consulting contract is terminated. Effective immediately." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. The room seemed to tilt. The scent of lilies and stale coffee pressed in around me. Somewhere behind us, someone laughed too loudly at a joke about the weather, and then swallowed it when they saw my face. "I beg your pardon," I said quietly. He took a sip of his drink and smiled. He had Margaret's cheekbones and his father's eyes, flat and hard. "You're retired, Ed," he said. "It's time. We all know Mom kept you around because she was sentimental. The whole founder in the flannel shirt thing played well in the ads, but the truth is, you haven't been involved in day-to-day operations for years. The company needs to move forward." One of the young men behind him gave a little snort of agreement, then looked down at his shoes when I glanced his way. I looked from the box to Trevor's face. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "We normally discuss board decisions in a meeting, Trevor. In the conference room. With minutes. Not here. Not today." He rolled his eyes. "The old board rules are gone," he said. "We're streamlining. Besides, this is just a formality. Your contract was a courtesy. Margaret's idea. A sentimental charity case. We're not running a museum, Ed." The word charity hit harder than it should have. I swallowed. "I still sit on that board," I reminded him. "Until I resign, or they vote me out properly. And this company." He stepped closer, breath warm with whiskey. "Your company?" He cut in, his voice dropping. Sharp enough that even the server froze mid-reach a few tables away. "You really think that, old man?" Behind him, I could feel eyes on us. Cousins, longtime employees, Margaret's friends from the hospital auxiliary. People who had hugged me by the coffin an hour ago were now pretending to study their napkins. "You were Margaret's prop," Trevor went on. "The kindly founder. The brand mascot. The second she went in the ground, your usefulness did too, he said. Went in the ground, like he was talking about a dead battery, not his mother. For a heartbeat, I saw red. Every muscle in my body tensed. Part of me, the part that used to work double shifts hauling 50-pound sacks of tomatoes, wanted to put him through the damn table. But then I saw Margaret's picture over his shoulder, that caught in mid-laugh smile, and I remembered the way she'd squeezed my hand in the hospital and made me promise there'd be no scenes. No fighting over her body. No shouting over her coffin. This is not how we do things, Trevor, I said. Not in my company. Not in her name. He smirked. You still don't get it, he said. Then he turned his head toward the doorway. Excuse me, can we get some help here? A hotel security guard in a navy blazer materialized, nervous and eager to please. Sir, Trevor gestured toward me with his glass. Mr. Lawson here is very upset. It's been a long day. I think it's best for everyone's comfort if he calls it a night. The guard shifted his weight, clearly not thrilled about escorting the man whose name was on half the whores. D'Uver's out of his own wife's reception, but a paying client is a paying client. He looked at me. Sir, I stared at Trevor. You're really doing this here, I said. Pick up the box, Ed, he replied. It's got your nameplate. Some pictures from your office. We cleared it out for you. You can drop your badge with HR tomorrow. Oh, and don't worry about the board stuff. We'll handle that. I looked down. Through the gap in the cardboard, I saw the corner of a framed photo, me and Margaret standing in front of the first warehouse, both of us younger and thinner, covered in tomato stains and grinning like we'd just robbed a bank. My hands started to shake. He thought a leather chair and a title made him king, I thought. He has no idea who still holds the crown. Because here's the part Trevor never bothered to learn. Years ago, when Lawson Heritage Foods started attracting buyout offers, Margaret and I sat at our kitchen table night after night with our lawyer, arguing over trusts and share classes and succession plans. We came up with something boring and ugly on paper that did one very simple thing. It put the voting power where the work had come from. On the company records, my title might only say, Senior Operations Consultant. On the commercials, the smiling woman stirring sauce might have been the founder. But buried in a file Trevor had never read. In a trust he thought was just tax nonsense. There's a line with my name on it and a number next to it, 55% of the voting rights. He thought Margaret left him everything outright. He thought a CEO badge was the same as a deed. That's the kind of mistake you only get to make once. The guard cleared his throat again. Mr. Lawson. I bent down, picked up the box. It was heavier than it looked. My knees complained, old bones reminding me I wasn't 25 anymore. Someone near the bar started whispering. I straightened up, box in my arms, and for a moment, my eyes met those of Susan from accounting. She'd been with us since we could barely afford a receptionist. Her face was pale, her mouth a tight line. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Don't, not here, not now. I walked past Trevor without another word. He lifted his glass in a mock toast. Enjoy retirement, he called after me. We'll send you a gift basket. I stepped out into the hallway, then through the side doors into the hotel parking lot. The late afternoon air hit me, cool and sharp, smelling of cigarette smoke and rain on hot asphalt. Behind me, through the glass, I could still hear the low murmur of conversation, the clink of plates. Inside, they were telling stories about Margaret. Out here, it was just me and a box and a heart that felt like it had been scooped out with a dull spoon. Across the circular drive, 3 white vans sat idling. The Lawson Heritage Foods logo painted on their sides. The script Margaret had chosen curled across the doors. From our family kitchen to yours. My name wasn't on there anywhere, but my sweat was in every letter. I stood there, staring at those vans, at the reflection of the hotel's fancy facade in their windshields. My hands tightened on the cardboard until it creaked. He thinks this is the end of me, I thought. He thinks, because I'm old and tired and my wife is in the ground, that I'm going to shuffle off with my little box and disappear. I shifted the weight of the box in my arms and took a long breath, tasting lilies and coffee and whiskey and asphalt. The hurt was a living thing inside my chest, but under it, beneath the grief and the humiliation, something else flickered, cold, sharp. Familiar? No, this was not the end. If you've ever been thrown away by someone who never built a damn thing in their life, you know the taste in my mouth right then. It's bitter, but it wakes you up. I looked at our logo one more time, then turned toward my car. He might have fired me at my own wife's funeral reception, but the boy had made one fatal mistake. He'd forgotten who actually owned the matches, the fuel, and the deed to the kitchen. And I was about to remind him. Every inch he tried to steal, I was going to take back. With interest. I am 69 years old, but when I think about how all this started, I still see myself at 34, standing in a rented church kitchen that smelled like bleach and boiled tomatoes. Back then, Lawson Heritage Foods was just an idea Margaret and I were too stubborn to let die. We had both been laid off from the same cannery within a month of each other, along with half the line crew. The company called it restructuring. To us, it felt like a punch in the gut. 30 men and women, including me, got a handshake and a box of hairnets. Margaret, who ran quality control, got a bouquet of supermarket flowers and a speech about moving on to exciting new chapters. We met in the unemployment line, if you can believe that. I was behind her, holding a folder with my work history and a thermos of burnt coffee. She was in front of me, clutching a notebook stuffed with scribbles and recipes. She kept sighing under her breath, and finally I said, "Long day." Just to hear my own voice. She turned, looked at me with those sharp green eyes, and said, "I am standing in a government office on a Tuesday holding my life in a manila folder. It is not exactly short." Then she smiled like she'd heard how sharp she sounded and wanted to take the edge off. "Sorry. I have not had my second coffee." I offered her mine. She made a face, took a sip, and said it was terrible. Then she drank the rest. 2 months later, we were cooking sauce together in that church kitchen, renting it by the hour after the bingo ladies went home. We used her grandmother's marinara recipe as a base, tweaking it with whatever herbs we could get cheap. I lugged in 50-pound boxes of tomatoes from a wholesaler who took pity on us. She washed, chopped, stirred. I figured out how to keep the burners from cutting off when the ancient pilot lights rattled. She figured out which local farmers' markets would let us set up a folding table for free if we donated a few jars to the raffle. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The steam from the dryers kept our place warm in winter. I built makeshift shelves out of cinder blocks and scavenged planks, stacking jars until the whole place looked like the back room of a grocery store. At night, when the last batch was sealed and cooling, we would sit on overturned milk crates, our backs against the humming refrigerator, counting the day's take and dreaming about what we would do when we could afford a used delivery van. We bought that van our second year. It was white, rust chewing at the wheel wells, one headlight held in with tape. We painted Lawson Heritage Foods on the side with stencils and a quart of navy blue enamel. Though came out crooked. Margaret laughed and said it gave it character. That was the beginning. From the start, we had our roles. I was the machinery guy. I knew how long sauce could simmer before it turned bitter, how many jars could run down a gravity-fed line before the pressure dropped. I taught myself scheduling, routing, basic bookkeeping. I could look at a loading dock and guess to within 15 minutes how long it would take to get a pallet from our place to a mom and pop grocer across town. Margaret was the storyteller. She designed the first labels at our kitchen table with a box of colored pencils and an old typewriter. "From our family kitchen to yours," she typed, hunting and pecking the letters. "People want to feel like they are buying from someone, not something," she said. She visited every independent grocer within 50 miles, apron on, hair tied back, tray of crackers and sauce samples in hand. She smiled, listened, remembered names. I watched old, skeptical managers turn into eager partners after 20 minutes with her. By the time I married her, 2 years in, I already loved her. By the time I met Trevor, I was terrified of ruining what little family she had left. She had divorced his father long before I came into the picture. From what she told me, and what I saw in the man's eyes the one time he showed up at the factory gates demanding money, entrepreneur was a polite word for con artist. He bounced from scheme to scheme. Import-export, motivational speaking, some kind of bogus franchise deal, always with a grin and a new business card, always leaving overdrafts and broken promises behind. Trevor got his charm from him, Margaret said once, folding laundry at our apartment table. I am trying to make sure that is not all he gets. The first time I met Trevor, he was 10, skinny as a rail, standing on the front steps of the duplex Margaret used to rent. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder and a look on his face like someone owed him an apology. "Trevor, this is Ed," Margaret said, her hand on my arm. "We work together." He looked me up and down, taking in the stained work shirt and the battered boots. "You smell like tomatoes," he said. "That is because I have been standing over a boiling pot of sauce for 8 hours," I told him. "You want a ride in the van?" He shrugged, but when we walked down to the curb and he saw the logo on the side, his eyes lit up. I let him sit in the passenger seat, showed him how the lift gate worked, let him honk the horn once in the empty lot behind the building. He did not say much, but when Margaret came out with the last box, he was already bragging. "Mom, he let me press the pallet jack handle. It is heavy, but I can do it." I thought then that maybe we would be all right. Over the years, though, I started to see the pattern. Trevor grew into a handsome young man with his father's easy smile and Margaret's bone structure. At school functions, teachers loved him. He could talk his way out of missed homework and into extra credit. At the factory, on the rare weekends he came by, he would charm the line workers in the break room, listening to their stories, laughing at their jokes. Then, when a pallet needed restacking or a shipment had to go out in the rain, he would suddenly remember somewhere else he had to be. "Why should I lug boxes when we can just hire people for that?" he said to me once when he was 17, lounging against the loading dock rail in a brand new pair of sneakers Margaret definitely could not afford. "You and Mom are still thinking like factory rats, not owners. Those of factory rats pay for that phone in your pocket," I said quietly. "And that car you are learning to drive." He rolled his eyes and wandered back into the office, where Margaret was helping him with a college application essay. She wanted so badly for him to feel invested that she started giving him titles. First it was social media intern, then brand ambassador. When he came back from college, degree in communications, minor in something called new media. She made him VP of strategic innovation. I watched the business cards get more impressive while the actual work he did stayed thin. He was good in meetings, I will give him that. He could stand in front of a projection screen and talk for 20 minutes about synergy and millennial brand engagement, while waving his hands over slides someone else made. He loved spending money on image, sleek new office chairs, a coffee bar in the lobby, a glossy rebranding campaign. But when the canning line jammed at 3 in the morning, he was asleep in his loft downtown. When the union rep called to negotiate overtime rates, he suddenly had an important strategy session at a co-working space. Margaret saw it too, though she did not always admit it out loud. "He is not you, Ed," she would say when I came home angry after he missed another production meeting. "He grew up different. If we give him responsibility, he will grow into it." We tried. We really did. But the more rope we gave him, the more he used it to decorate himself, not to pull his weight. It was around the time we started getting serious buyout offers that our lawyer, Elaine, sat us down and said, "If you two want this company to outlive you, we need a real plan on paper, not just trust and good intentions." We spent months hammering it out. Margaret and I at our kitchen table, Elaine across from us with a stack of draft documents, the sound of the refrigerator humming under the weight of sample jars. "This part is simple," Elaine said, tapping the trust agreement. "Hay can have the money, Ed, but you keep the rudder." The structure we ended up with was not romantic, but it was solid. We created the Heritage Voting Trust. As trustee, held 55% of the voting shares. Control over big decisions, like selling property or firing executives. Margaret kept a block of non-voting preferred shares, and her estate plan earmarked the income from those, plus other non-voting shares, for Trevor. He would have a comfortable life as long as the company thrived. If he proved himself, I could, in time, share more control. If he did not, I could keep the wheel straight. "Promise me," Margaret said one night, after we had signed the last document. We were alone in the office, the factory dark behind the glass, only the safety lights glowing. She had her head on my shoulder, my arm around her waist. "Promise me you will protect him from himself, and protect our people from him, if it ever comes to that." "I promise," I told her. And I meant it. My greatest mistake was not in signing those papers. It was in how I treated Trevor afterward. Out of love for her, I pulled my punches. When he spent too much on another pointless marketing stunt, I grumbled but let Margaret smooth it over. When he skipped a plant tour to fly to a branding retreat in Miami, I rolled my eyes and told myself he was still young. Every time he brushed off real work with a joke, I thought, next year, he will settle. He will see. I thought time would teach him what work really meant. I was wrong. All time did was teach him how to hide his laziness better, how to talk prettier while doing less. And I let it go, because the sight of Margaret's face, hopeful and proud when she watched him present a new ad campaign, hurt more than the overtime I paid to cover his messes. No one knew about the trust except the three of us and Elaine. The employees did not, the board did not, certainly not Trevor's friends in their slim suits. To the outside world he was the heir apparent. To him, apparently, that meant he had already inherited. Margaret left me more than a stack of signed documents in that lawyer's filing cabinet. She left me a sealed envelope in her nightstand with my name on it. I have held that envelope in my hands a dozen times over the past year, tracing the curve of her handwriting, feeling the weight of what might be inside. But I could not bring myself to open it while she was still fighting, and after she died, the grief sat on my chest like a sack of wet cement. If I had opened it the day she died, maybe I would have seen what was coming. Maybe I would have been ready when Trevor walked into that hotel lounge with whiskey on his breath and a box in his hands. Instead, I left it sealed, tucked between her scarves, and drove home from the funeral thinking, stupidly, that at least the house would be quiet and mine. I did not know that by the time I pulled into the driveway, the first pieces of my life were already being packed into boxes and labeled old. I am 69 years old, and that drive back from the hotel felt longer than any delivery route I ever ran. The sun was sliding down behind the trees when I turned onto our street, that nice, quiet cul-de-sac Margaret had fallen in love with 15 years ago. After everything we have been through, she had said back then, standing in the half-finished driveway. We deserve somewhere with sidewalks and maple trees and neighbors who wave. I had laughed and told her I would pour the driveway myself, if that was what it took to make her smile like that. I pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. For a second I just sat there, hands on the wheel, hoping the house would feel like a refuge. The funeral, Trevor's little show at the hotel, all of it had hollowed me out. I wanted the familiar creak of the front steps, Margaret's robe hanging on the hook, the framed photo of the first factory opening over the mantel. Instead, the first thing I noticed was the van. Not mine. A rental box truck sat in the driveway, hazard lights blinking, ramped down. Two men in gray movers' shirts were coming down it backwards, carrying my recliner. My recliner. The leather one Margaret had surprised me with on our 20th anniversary. The one I had fallen asleep in 100 times watching late night ball games. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating. Then I saw another guy inside the front window, a stranger walking past with a framed photograph pressed to his chest. Even through the glass, in the fading light, I knew that frame. It held the picture from the ribbon, cutting at our first standalone plant. I grabbed my keys and my little cardboard box from the hotel and practically stumbled up the walkway. The motion light flicked on, bathing the porch in harsh white. I pressed my key fob to the lock like I had done 1,000 times. The panel flashed red. A sharp, flat beep sounded. I frowned and tried again. Red. Beep. I keyed in the 4-digit code Margaret and I had chosen the day we moved in, our wedding date. The panel blinked, thought about it, and spat back a message I had never seen before. A CSS Denon, GMIN. My heart climbed up into my throat. I could still see the movers through the sidelights, my things in their hands. I pounded on the door with the heel of my fist. "Hey!" I shouted. "What the hell is going on?" There was a shuffle inside, a low burst of laughter, the clink of glass. Footsteps approached. The deadbolt clicked. The door swung open and there she was, Lena. Trevor's wife leaned lazily against the frame like she was posing for a photo shoot. She had one bare foot crossed over the other, red painted toes peeking out from under the hem of black silk lounge pants. In one hand she held a bowl-sized wineglass half full of something deep and expensive. Over her shoulders, hanging loose, was Margaret's favorite cashmere cardigan, the soft gray one she used to wrap around herself on cold mornings. Seeing it on Lena felt like a slap. She said, her voice bright with that rehearsed warmth she used on her followers. You scared me. You are banging like a debt collector. This is my house, I said. My voice came out hoarse. What are those men doing with my furniture? Why is my code not working? She tilted her head, the way she did at the end of her videos, the concerned but still hot look. Oh, you know we all love you, she said. But Trevor has to think about liability. You wandering around here makes him uneasy. Liability, I repeated, staring at her. Over her shoulder I could see the walls inside. The warm, buttery paint color Margaret and I had chosen was gone in patches, covered with rectangles of harsh white primer. The gallery of family photos that used to run up the staircase. Wedding, factory openings. Trevor at 9 missing his front teeth, was stripped bare. In their place, cardboard tubes and flat, packed frames leaned against the baseboards, an army of minimalist art waiting to erase whatever was left. I paid the first 10 years on this mortgage, I said slowly. I poured that driveway myself. I signed my name on every document. I am not a liability. I live here. She took a sip of her wine, perfectly unbothered. Trevor says corporate housing is for active executives only, she said. It is all in the paperwork. This place is technically a company asset, and, well, you are not on the payroll anymore. He has a retirement cottage option in mind for you, though. Once the estate is fully probated, we can get you settled somewhere quiet. On the coffee table just inside, I saw it. Margaret's pearl pendant necklace. The one I had taken off her for the last time in the hospital and locked in the bedroom safe, because my hands would not stop shaking. It lay now across a glossy coffee table book about Scandinavian interiors, like a prop. And then my eyes fell to Lena's left hand. She was absently twisting a ring around her finger as she talked, a habit of hers when she was bored. It was an old-fashioned gold band with a small, worn diamond, the metal warm from years of skin. My mother's ring, the one my father had slipped on her finger in a church basement in 1948. The one she had given to me on her deathbed, making me promise to keep it in the family. I had kept it in the top drawer of my dresser, in a little box with a cracked velvet lining. Where did you get that? I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. She glanced down, feigning surprise. This? She smiled. Isn't it sweet? Trevor says these old things should stay in the family. And I am family now. A heat rushed to my face so fast I had to put my hand on the doorframe to steady myself. Lena, I said. That was my mother's, not Margaret's. You had no right to go through my drawers, let alone. She cut me off with a puff of air, blowing a piece of hair out of her eyes. Do not be dramatic. The estate attorney said all personal effects are under review until everything is sorted. I am just keeping it warm. She wiggled her fingers and laughed at her own joke. Behind her, one of the movers rolled my old filing cabinet past, a strip of blue tape across the top drawer ARCHIV. Another came down the stairs with a cardboard box labeled Recipes ED. Something in me snapped back into focus. I want to come in, I said. We will talk about this with Trevor present. I will get my own things and my own documents, and we will see about this corporate housing nonsense. Her smile flattened a fraction. I cannot let you do that, she said, and there was steel now under the honey. Trevor has put enhanced security measures in place. For our safety. After the way you reacted at the funeral, he is concerned you might lash out. The last thing we need is you having some episode in here and suing the company. How I reacted. I stared at her. I stood up and walked out with a box he threw at my feet. I did not even raise my voice. She shrugged, already bored. People talk. Anyway, the locks are changed. It is out of my hands. As if on cue, one of the movers appeared at her elbow with a dolly stacked with 3 taped-up boxes. He wheeled them out past her and down onto the porch, then bumped them down the steps. Each one had my name scrawled across it in black marker, followed by personal effects. He left them in the driveway, in the thin drizzle that had started to fall. There, Lena said, as if that settled something. Clothes, toiletries, whatever was clearly yours. We told them to be respectful. If there is anything else you are missing, Trevor says we can talk about it later. My throat felt tight. I took a step forward. She did not move, just watched me like I was an old dog who might bite. Where is Trevor? I asked. She checked the time on her watch. Some sleek, expensive thing that did not belong in my doorway. On a call with the branding agency, she said. Big things happening. Repositioning the whole heritage angle. Making it more aspirational. You would not really get it, Ed. On the table, the pearl pendant caught the fading light and winked at me like an accusation. And your health plan is being reviewed too, by the way. She added, almost as an afterthought. Something about age brackets and cost centers. I do not know, that was all legal talk. But they said someone would be in touch. It felt like a fist closed around my chest. Not a heart attack, not yet. Just a cold squeeze of realization. House, locks, safe, ring, necklace. Now my insurance. Trevor was not just lashing out. He was stripping me down systematically like he had been waiting for the chance. I did the only thing I could in that moment. I bent, picked up the nearest box, heavier than it looked, full of books by the feel of it, and held it against my hip. My hands shook so badly the tape crinkled. I am not done with this, I said quietly. Not with you, not with him. She smiled again, wide and empty. Of course not, she said. We are family. Then she closed the door in my face. I stood there on the porch for a long beat, rain starting to spot my suit sleeves, listening to the lock click. Through the sidelight I saw one of the new abstract canvases leaned against the wall, a smear of black paint where our wedding photo used to hang. Eventually I made myself move. I dragged the boxes down the walkway, one at a time, my back screaming in protest. The neighbors' curtains twitched. No one came out. It is funny how people who will borrow your ladder and your snowblower will suddenly find something to do in the back of the house when they see a man your age hauling his life to the curb. When all 3 boxes were piled near my car, damp cardboard darkening in the drizzle, I sat on the bumper and pulled out my wallet. I still had my joint bank card. I had not checked the balance in days. Why would I? It had been our account for decades. I walked to the corner store at the end of the block and bought a bottle of water I did not want, just to run the card, to see something normal. The terminal beeped. Declined. Repartad Stiolen. The clerk glanced at me, then at the screen. You got another one, sir? He asked. I stared at the little plastic rectangle in my hand, my name embossed in raised letters that suddenly meant nothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thumb shaking on the banking app. Logifidi then. After a third try, an error message assisiu in cifrazen pedienge istatravido ibu tempo r esq tartian. In the span of a few hours I had gone from a man who co-owned a company, a house, and a future to an old guy standing under the flickering fluorescent lights of a corner store with a dead card and $40 in cash in his pocket. I walked back to the car, slower this time. The drizzle had become real rain. It tapped on the tops of the boxes like impatient fingers. I opened the nearest one, just to see what they had decided counted as personal effects. On top, half crushed, was a flannel shirt Margaret always said made my eyes look less tired. Under it, wrapped in tissue paper, was an old cigar box. My name was written on the lid in her handwriting. My heart stuttered. I opened it with clumsy fingers. Inside was the envelope. Cream-colored, my name on the front. Eat if I go first. My vision blurred. For a second I thought it was rain on the paper, but my face was dry. My hands were shaking too hard to get a finger under the flap. Not yet, I thought. Not here, not like this. I slid the envelope back into the box, closed the lid, and tucked it under my arm. I stood there beside my damp cardboard life, rain soaking through my suit, watching the house I had poured and paid for glow warm and golden behind new curtains I had not chosen. I thought that was the worst of it. I had not yet tried to refill my medication. I am 69 years old, and I checked into the kind of motel I used to warn my drivers about. The neon sign out front buzzed and blinked, half the letters dead, so it just read, TL. The lobby smelled like stale coffee and mop water. Behind the counter, a kid with Akin and headphones barely glanced up when I asked about a room. Weekly rate is cheaper. He mumbled, eyes back on his phone. Weekly, then, I said, because I did not know when any of this would end, and because admitting I might be back home by tomorrow felt like lying to myself. I paid cash. That used to be a point of pride for me, peeling bills off a roll I had earned with my own hands. Now it felt like pulling strips off my own skin. The keycard he handed me was sticky at the edges. Room 120B. The hallway carpet was a crime scene of old stains and ground in grit. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first: old cigarettes, cheap disinfectant, and something underneath it all like soured milk. The bedspread was a color that might once have been green. The lamp on the nightstand leaned a little, like it had given up standing straight somewhere around 1995. I set my boxes down by the door and sat on the edge of the mattress. Springs complained under my weight. Through the thin wall I could hear the muffled drone of a television and someone coughing, wet and deep. Outside, trucks roared past on the highway, gears whining, air brakes sighing. My trucks used to sound like that. Men and women I knew by name drove them. Tonight they were just ghosts on the other side of a dirty window. I emptied my pockets onto the little table by the window. Wallet. Keys that no longer opened anything. Crumpled receipts. The cash I had left after the motel: a few 20s, some 5s, a lonely 10. When I counted it twice, just to be sure, I realized I had a bit over $300 to my name until I figured out how to pry my own accounts back open. I had not changed jobs. My job had been stolen. For a long time I just sat there, staring at that little pile of money. In my better years I had signed 7-figure supplier checks without blinking. I had argued over freight rates in the tens of thousands. Now I was calculating whether I could afford both food and gas next week. My chest started to hurt around midnight. It was not the first time. The doctors had told me after my last episode that my heart was like an old engine. Fine as long as I did not push it too hard, but prone to seizing if I ignored the warning lights. I kept a bottle of little white pills in my desk at the office, and another in the medicine cabinet at home. As long as I had those, I could ride out the flutters, the tightness. I reached for my jacket pocket, fingers already remembering the shape of the bottle. Nothing. I checked the other pocket. My pants. The cardboard box where I had stuffed my things at the house. Panic rose, sharp and hot. The pills were in the desk drawer Trevor had emptied, or in the bathroom cabinet Lena had probably already restyled. The pain squeezed tighter, a band clamping around my ribs. I tried to breathe slow like the doctor had taught me, but the room seemed to tilt. The buzzing of the neon sign outside grew louder, like a hive in my skull. There was a 24-hour pharmacy a few blocks down the frontage road. I knew because we used to ship to the little strip mall next to it. Half our ketchup stock went through there in summer. I put on my jacket, grabbed my wallet, and stepped out into the night. The drizzle from earlier had turned into a steady, cold mist. It soaked into my clothes in seconds, chilling the sweat already breaking out on my back. Every step sent a fresh pulse of pain through my chest, but I kept going. Left, right, breathe. Left, right, breathe. By the time the automatic doors whooshed open in front of me, my breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. The fluorescent lights inside were so bright they hurt. I gripped the edge of a shelf until the spinning slowed. A woman behind the pharmacy counter looked up. She was maybe mid-40s, hair pulled back in a bun, glasses slipping down her nose. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Lawson," she said. "You are the Lawson guy, right? From the commercials." I managed a nod. "Do you need an ambulance?" she asked, already reaching for the phone. "No," I wheezed. "Just my prescription. Nitroglycerin. Edward Lawson. It should be in the system." She hesitated, then turned to her computer and started typing. I watched her face change as the screen populated. "I am not sure what is going on here," she said slowly. "Your coverage shows as canceled. It says the policy was terminated as of 2 days ago." "Did you change jobs?" I had not changed jobs. My job had been stolen. "My insurance is through the company," I said. "Lawson Heritage Foods. There must be a mistake." "Maybe," she said, her forehead creasing. "We can still fill it, but it will be out of pocket." "How much?" I asked. She checked the dosage, the quantity. "For the full refill, $168. I thought of the little pile of bills on the motel table. I thought of the weekly rate I had just paid, the food I had not yet bought. I pulled out my company health card anyway and slid it across. She ran it. The machine spat back an angry beep. "Declined." "Do you have another?" she asked gently. I handed her my personal credit card. "Declined." "My debit card." "Repart off artisan." Behind me, I could feel a line forming. A young mother rocking a crying baby. A man in a paint-splattered hoodie holding a bottle of cough syrup. They were all staring at the old man with the shaking hands and the dead plastic. "Look," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I will pay cash. Can you just give me half the refill?" She tapped on the keyboard. Recalculated. That would be 84, she said. Or I can recommend an over-the-counter alternative for now. It is not as strong, but it might help with the symptoms. I counted out the bills. Fingers clumsy and clinging. $84 gone, just like that. Nearly a third of what I had left. I took the smaller bottle she handed me as if it weighed 100 pounds. Please, if it gets worse, call 911, she said, sincere worry in her eyes. I will, I lied. The walk back felt longer. The drizzle had turned to fine needles, stinging my cheeks. I swallowed the first pill dry in the parking lot, leaning against a lamppost until the vise around my chest loosened a notch. Back in room 12B, I filled a motel ice bucket from the bathroom tap and drank until the bitterness on my tongue faded. Then I lay back on the bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a map of somewhere I had never been, a place I did not particularly want to visit. 40 years ago I had slept on sacks of flour in a freezing storeroom so a shipment could go out at dawn. 30 years ago I had driven an entire state's worth of miles in that crooked, lettered van to convince grocery managers we were worth a chance. I had thought those were my hard days. Nothing humbles you like realizing you cannot afford your own heart medicine. After a while I rolled onto my side and reached for my wallet. I do not know why. Habit, maybe. Reassurance. Inside one of the folds, behind a worn punch card from a diner that no longer existed, was a Polaroid. Me and Margaret standing in front of that first van. My hair still mostly brown. Her ponytail escaping from under a ball cap. Both of us splattered with sauce, tired to the bone, grinning like fools. On the back, in her handwriting, "We did it." I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. I had been poor before. I had eaten canned soup 3 nights a week and counted quarters at the laundromat. I had started from nothing with a woman who believed in me when most people did not know my name. Money, I realized, had made me soft. Not in work. I had kept that up. But in what I thought I needed to survive. I was poor before. I thought, I can be poor again. I know how to fight from nothing. My gaze drifted to the cigar box on the table. The one with the envelope inside. My hands had steadied a bit. The pills and the water and the sheer exhaustion had smoothed the worst edges of the panic. I sat up, picked up the box, and opened it. The envelope was heavier than it looked. "Ed, if I go first," in Margaret's looping script. I slid a finger under the flap and tore it open. Her scent did not waft out, that was a fantasy. It was just paper and ink. But for a moment, seeing her words, it felt like she was in the room. "Ed," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I did not get my miracle." I had to wipe my eyes before I could go on. "You always said I was too soft on Trevor. Maybe you were right. I know I was blind to some things where he was concerned. That is why you hold the wheel, Ed. You always did." She wrote about the Heritage Voting Trust, about the meetings with Elaine. "You have control, even if he has the cameras," she reminded me. 55% is not just a number. It is a responsibility. To our workers. To the people who buy our jars thinking there really is some old fool stirring the pot. Then came the part that made my throat close. "If you are reading this because Trevor has hurt you," she wrote, "go see Elaine Park, our old lawyer. She knows everything. She knows what we set up and why. She promised me she would help you if it came to this. Do not let him burn down what we built to pay for his toys. And do not let him turn you into a ghost in your own story. You are not a prop. You are the reason any of this exists." At the bottom, in smaller letters, almost an afterthought, "Protect our people, Ed. From him, if you have to. I am so sorry to leave you with this mess. I love you. Always am." I sat there with that letter in my lap, the sounds of strangers' televisions bleeding through the walls, the highway humming like a distant ocean. A few hours earlier, lying on that same bed, a part of me had thought that if my heart decided it was done, maybe that would not be the worst thing. The grief, the shame, the sudden smallness of my life, none of it felt worth fighting. Now, holding her words, I felt something else rise up, not joy, not hope exactly, something colder, cleaner, anger, yes, but not the wild, swinging kind. The kind you sharpen. Trevor had not just embarrassed me. He had cut off my access to medicine, to my home, to my money, and by extension, to the livelihoods of hundreds of people who had trusted our name to mean something. He thought he could freeze me out and cash me in. He had forgotten I still had the wheel. And now I had a reason, ink on paper, to use it. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope, then into my wallet, behind the Polaroid. 2 anchors, past and promise. I slept maybe an hour that night in short, jagged pieces. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Trevor's smirk, Lena's ringed hand, Margaret's looping handwriting. By dawn, the sky outside the dirty window was turning the color of dishwater, and I knew exactly whose number I needed to dial. And I knew I could not use a phone Trevor could trace. I am 69 years old, and that morning I bought a phone that did not know my name. The convenience store a mile from the motel had a little rotating rack by the counter, plastic packages with cheap flip phones hanging like candy. Once upon a time, I signed off on a company-wide smartphone upgrade and grumbled about the bill. Today I picked the second cheapest model and paid cash, no contracts. No apps, just numbers. The kid at the register scanned it without looking up. "You want minutes with that?" he asked. "I will manage," I said. I loaded the SIM card sitting on the curb outside, the plastic crackling in my hands. The whole thing felt like something out of a bad spy movie, but my regular phone was on a corporate plan. Trevor could see every call, every text if he bothered to ask IT. I was not going to plan my war on a line he controlled. I walked from there to the one place I knew I could think, Manny's Diner. Manny's has been squatting under the overpass since before I came to this town. Red vinyl booths, chrome trim, a jukebox in the corner that has not worked since the Clinton administration. The coffee is terrible and endless. The waitresses have seen everything and talk about none of it. Truckers, nurses coming off night shift, a cop or two. It is the kind of place where minding your own business is the house special. I slid into a back booth with my back to the wall, more out of habit than paranoia, and wrapped my hands around a chipped mug. The coffee scalded my tongue. It tasted like yesterday and the day before that and the one before that, and somehow that steadied me. I flipped open the new phone. The keypad felt small under my fingers. I dug Margaret's letter out of my wallet and smoothed it on the table, tracing the name she had written. Elaine Park, our old lawyer. The number was still in there in Margaret's looping script. I dialed. It rang 3 times before anyone picked up. Then a voice I had not heard in years, dry as kindling, said, "This is Elaine." "Elaine," I said. "It is Ed Lawson." There was a pause, a chair creaking somewhere on her end. "Ed," she said slowly. "I was wondering how long it would take you." That stopped me. "Your name hit my inbox yesterday," she said. "Change of officer filing. Termination of senior consulting role. Attempted amendment to the bylaws marked urgent modernization. I have not been on retainer for 5 years and yet, funny thing, the state still sends me updates when someone messes with a corporation I built." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. "So you know. I know someone is trying to play with matches in your kitchen," she said. "Where are you?" "Manny's," I answered. "Back booth." "I will be there in 20, she said. "Order me coffee. Black. If you are paying with a card, do not bother." She hung up before I could answer. Exactly 19 minutes later, she walked in. Elaine looked older, the way we all did, but there was nothing soft about her. Mid-60s now. Short gray hair cut in a no-nonsense bob, dark suit pressed sharp enough to cut. She carried a leather briefcase so worn around the handle it looked like it had been to war and back. Maybe it had. She scanned the room automatically. Then lined for me. No hug, no small talk. She slid into the booth, set the briefcase down, and nodded at the mug across from her. "You remembered," she said. "You remembered me," I replied. She snorted. Hard to forget the couple who argued for 3 hours over a comma in Section 12. The waitress came by, topped off our cups, left without asking questions. Elaine waited until she was gone, then leaned forward. "So," she said. "Tell me exactly how stupid Margaret's boy has been," I told her. About the hotel. The box at my feet. The security guard called to escort me out of my own wife's reception. About the house. The movers, Lena and Margaret's sweater and my mother's ring. The frozen accounts. The dead insurance. As I talked, the line of Elaine's mouth tightened. She did not interrupt much, just asked a question here and there, precise as a scalpel. When I finished, she sat back and let out a long, slow breath. "Well," she said, "he is not just cruel. He is sloppy. That is one word for it," I said. She popped the clasps on her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, rubber, banded and labeled in her neat handwriting, "Liauz's Arge, Tirasti biwaladuas. You still have this? I asked. Eid. I keep copies of everything, she said. Clients die. Their children get ideas. I do not trust memory. She flipped the folder open, revealing the Heritage Voting Trust we had signed what felt like a lifetime ago. And an updated will Margaret had executed after her first scare in the hospital. Let us start with what he thinks, Elaine said. He thinks your wife left him everything. Correct. That is what he said, I replied. Mum left it to me. I am the CEO now. She tapped a paragraph with her pen. Margaret left him the majority of the Class B non-voting shares. Those are the ones that pay dividends. Income. He inherits a very nice stream of money, assuming the company does not crash and burn. She also left him the title. Assuming the board plays along, and me, I asked, even though I already knew. Hearing it from someone else mattered. You, she said, looking me dead in the eye, are the trustee of the Heritage Voting Trust, holding 55% of the class of voting shares. You have unilateral veto over any asset sale over 1 million and, more importantly, you have an emergency removal power. For cause. She smiled, a thin, wolfish curve. He cannot vote you out, Ed. He can shout, threaten, posture, but he cannot outvote 55%. For the first time since the funeral, I felt my spine straighten. I was not a ghost. I was the trustee. So I could fire him tomorrow, I said. The idea tasted strange in my mouth, bitter, tempting. Elaine lifted a hand. Not just because, she cautioned. This is not a bar fight. That clause is for gross negligence or deliberate harm to corporate assets and brand. You cannot invoke it because he is an ungrateful brat who threw your clothes on the lawn. Personal cruelty does not count. The Chancery Court does not care about your feelings. It cares about numbers. I swallowed my first response. Has he done anything to the business yet? She asked. Not to you. To the business. I thought of the things I had overheard in hallways over the past year. Trevor talking about unlocking the value of the Riverside property, calling the cannery obsolete. His pitch about outsourcing production overseas where labor was more flexible. The stupid virtual pantry idea. Some crypto-backed subscription nonsense he could never properly explain, full of buzzwords and air. He has talked, I said, about selling the old cannery land, about moving production to Mexico, about some blockchain thing. Talk is not enough, Elaine said. We need hard evidence. Signed letters of intent, asset sale schedules, undervalued transfers. Anything that shows he is putting personal gain or ego above the company's health. She pulled another document from her case, thinner, printed on glossy paper. A mock-up of a real estate brochure. On the cover, an artist's rendering of sleek glass condos by a familiar curve of river. The heading, Riverfront Lofts, Luxury Living on a Historic Site. I recognized the silhouette of the buildings behind the fake trees. He had kept the brick outline of our cannery in the sketch, turned my loading docks into valet parking. He filed a preliminary zoning inquiry last month, Elaine said. I got an automated notice. That is what made me start watching more closely. He is telling the city the plant is obsolete, underutilized real estate. He is promising jobs in hospitality and retail. Her lip curled. He is trying to turn your Heritage into a rooftop bar. Cold anger settled in my gut, heavier than grief, cleaner than panic. So we stop him, I said. We will, she replied. But we do it clean. We do it once. And we do it so thoroughly that if he ever files so much as a DBA in this state again, they will flag his name. She flipped a page, scanned it. He also submitted a partial amendment to the bylaws, trying to get rid of the dual-class structure. I filed an objection, citing procedural issues. That bought us time. But he will try again. What about the insurance? I asked. He canceled my coverage before he fired me. Or at least, someone did. That, she said, may be a separate gift. If he terminated your health coverage prior to your formal removal, and especially if he framed it as cost-saving due to your age, we could be looking at age discrimination, bad faith, maybe even constructive dismissal. But that is gravy. The main dish is still the trust. Elaine closed the folder and laced her fingers over it. Hair is what we need, she said. You have the legal authority. I can bring the law. What we are missing is the story the numbers tell. Get me proof he is selling or giving away company property at a loss, or shifting it to a shell he controls. Documentation, photos, bills of sale. Show me that his big ideas are really just looting dressed up in buzzwords. And then? I asked. And then, she said, we walk into that boardroom with the trust and the evidence and we gut him. Publicly. In front of everyone he is trying to impress. She sipped her coffee, grimaced. He likes to do things late at night, off the books, right? These boys always do. They think if they sign it at 2 in the morning, it does not count. I thought of the new security guards at the cannery gate, the rumors of after-hours inventory adjustments, the way the plant lights had been on later than usual lately when I drove by. He has been very interested in the yard shift, I said slowly. Told me once he was evaluating legacy assets. Elaine's eyes sharpened. Perfect, she said. That is when we will catch him. Tonight, if you have the stomach for it. I looked down at my hands. They were not young hands anymore. The skin was thinner, the veins more pronounced. They shook now and then when the pain got bad or the weather changed. But they had built something from nothing once. They could hold a camera. They could crawl under a fence. I have the stomach, I said. He has been counting me out for years. Time he learned I am still in the game. Elaine nodded. Good, she said. Finish your coffee. Get some rest if you can. Then go see what he is really doing to your factory after dark. Bring me back proof, Ed. She tapped the trust folder. You are not a prop in this story, she said quietly. You are the man with the only real vote that matters. Start acting like it. When I stepped back out into the daylight, the highway noise seemed less like a threat and more like an old song. For the first time since Margaret's heart stopped, mine was beating for something other than survival. The boy wanted to play CEO in my house. Fine. I was about to show him what happened when you tried to steal the crown while the king was still breathing. I am 69 years old, and that night I broke into a place I used to own the keys to. The Lawson Cannery sat by the river like it always had, a long brick spine along the water, windows glinting dull under the streetlights. For years we had used it in our marketing. Slow panning shots of the old smokestack, kids on bikes riding past the loading docks, heritage, music playing over images of our logo painted on aged brick. Half factory, half museum piece, Trevor's slide decks called it. To me it was just home. I parked my car 2 blocks away, behind a stack of shipping containers in a vacant lot that smelled of oil and rust. The air had that heavy, wet feel it gets a few hours after sunset by the river. Somewhere nearby, frogs were singing over the hum of distant traffic. From the hill above the plant I could see the main gate. The old guard shack where Walt used to sit with his thermos and crossword puzzle was dark now. In its place, 2 black pickup trucks were parked nose to nose, company name on the doors in aggressive block letters I did not recognize. Men in matching tactical vests stood smoking near the gate. New security Trevor had brought in. Big guys with shaved heads and earpieces, the kind who looked more at home outside a nightclub than a cannery. They did not know me. That was one small advantage to being pushed off stage. The new cast forgets the crew that built it. I slipped along the tree line, keeping low. I knew every inch of that perimeter. I had walked it after storms, checking for downed branches, for kids sneaking in to spray, paint the walls, for raccoons chewing at the dumpsters. At the northwest corner, by the old loading dock we closed after we automated the pallet runs, there was a section of chain link fence that did not quite meet the retaining wall. Welded once, long ago by me. We never got around to fixing the gap properly. It was on a list. There was always another list. The metal was cold and rough under my hands as I pulled it back, just enough to slide through. My jacket snagged, tearing at the hem. I sucked in my stomach. These days that took more effort than it used to, and wriggled, boots slipping in the damp dirt. For a second I was wedged, ribs pressed against the concrete, fence biting my back. My heart thumped a warning in my ears. Then I was through, kneeling in the shadow of the dock, catching my breath. Inside the yard, the lights were on full blast. Sodium lamps bathed everything in that sickly orange that makes good things look rotten. Forklifts beeped and whined, moving back and forth like ants under a kicked hill. The air smelled wrong, too much exhaust. Not enough tomatoes and steam. I crept along the back of a stack of empty pallets, the rough wood scraping my sleeve. When I reached the edge, I risked a peek. They were dismantling the heritage line. We had given it that name as a joke back when we first started automating. The old manual canning line, with its clanking belts and hand-operated crimpers, had been our workhorse in the early years. When we bought newer, faster equipment, I argued to scrap it, but Margaret said, "No. We will keep it for tours for photos. People like to see where things started." So we refurbished it, polished the original copper kettles until they shone, put up informational plaques. Kids on school trips would come through and listen wide-eyed while I explained how their grandparents' sauce got into jars. Now those kettles were hanging from a crane like gutted fish, swinging slowly as a forklift operator maneuvered them onto a flatbed. The conveyor belts were half disassembled, metal guts exposed. Tools clanged against concrete as men in coveralls cursed and sweated. One of the younger workers, a kid with a Lawson cap pulled low, shook his head as he guided a pallet jack loaded with stainless steel piping. My granddad installed that line. He muttered to the guy beside him, "They are tossing it like trash." "New boss says we need to modernize," the other answered. "Says this junk is going to scrap." "What do I know? I just do what the foreman tells me." A junk. Scrap. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. Beyond them, near the open bay door, trucks were backed up, ramps down. They did not wear our logo. The name on the sides was generic, something like Premier Asset Transport. Blue letters on white paint. Shell Outfits. Companies that made their money moving problems out of sight. I slipped my flip phone out of my pocket and flipped it open. The camera on it was a joke compared to the phones Trevor and his friends flashed around. But it would do. I zoomed in as best I could, hands as steady as I could make them, and snapped a shot of the closest kettle's serial plate, another of the old labeler being winched toward a pallet. Then the conveyor frame's ID tag. Click, click. Each tiny shutter sound felt like a hammer strike. Closer to the bay, on a stack of pallets, a clipboard sat unattended for a moment as the foreman argued with someone on a walkie-talkie. Even from my hiding spot, I could see the top sheet columns of numbers, neat blocks of type. I waited until his back turned, then hunched over and moved along the shadows hugging the wall. The ground vibrated under my boots as another forklift rolled past. My heart kept time with the beeps. At the pallets, I grabbed the clipboard and stepped back into the shadow of a stacked crate. My fingers fumbled at the pages. Bill of sale, obsolete equipment liquidation. A list of items: copper kettles, manual fillers, conveyors, even some of the wooden segnage we used on tours. Next to each, a value that made my stomach turn. He was selling the soul of our brand for less than scrap. The total at the bottom for the entire lot was less than what one of those kettles would fetch at auction. But it was the buyer line that made everything go cold. Purchaser: Riverfront Revital LLC. The address under it was familiar even before my brain put the pieces together. 220 Harbor Plaza, Suite 300. That was the same glossy office building where Lena had tried to launch her lifestyle studio a few years back. I had seen the rent checks go out before that venture quietly folded. He was not just selling off equipment cheap. He was selling it to a company tied to his own household. Move the assets out of Lawson at a loss, then resell them later at full market value through a shell. Pocket the difference. Strip the company blame, market conditions. Walk away rich. He was not just stealing metal. He was stealing our story and selling it by the pound. I snapped photos of the bill, the list, the total, the buyer's name and address. I made sure to get the signature line at the bottom. T. Kane, ink still glistening. A voice snapped behind me. "Hey, where's that manifest? We have to roll in 10. I set the clipboard back where I had found it, the paper rattling just a little in my still shaking hands, and melted back along the wall. Near the loading dock stairs, the plant manager stood with his cell phone pressed to his ear, face red, pacing. I knew him. Carl, 20 years in, a man who cared more about uptime than any spreadsheet ever could. I told him this stuff is not scrap. He hissed into the phone. It belongs in a museum or our visitor center, not a junkyard. Now he is talking about replacing half my crew with flex contractors in some warehouse in Mexico. This is insane. He paused, listening, then shook his head. "Yeah, well, he is the boss now, right?" he said bitterly. "If it goes south, it will be my signature on the shipping logs and his name in the press release." He hung up and rubbed his temples. I wanted to step out, to tell him he was not alone, that this madness had a limit. But that would have blown everything. I started back toward the fence. That was when I bumped the wrench. It lay half off a workbench, slick with grease. My boot caught it and sent it skittering across the concrete. The clang echoed off the metal walls like a gunshot. A spotlight snapped on, beam swinging across the yard. "Who is there?" a voice barked. One of the new guards, by the sound of it, young and mean and eager. I dove without thinking, sliding under the nearest pallet rack. Dust puffed up around me, dry and bitter. The slats above my face cast the world in stripes of light and shadow. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Boots approached, heavy, squeaking slightly with each step. The beam crawled along the ground, climbing the legs of the racks, sweeping toward me. I pressed myself flat, belly to the cold concrete, feeling every year in my bones. If they caught me, best case I would be marched out humiliated. Worst case, they would call the police, claim I was trespassing, maybe even vandalizing. Trevor would have exactly the story he wanted, the senile old man gone rogue. The boots stopped inches from my head. I could see the laces, the tread caked with mud. The light swept under the rack next to mine, then mine. It washed over my sleeve, my hand. I pulled back, willing myself to be nothing but shadow. "Damn rats," the guard muttered finally. "Places crawling with them." The beam moved on. The boots retreated, thudding across the yard. I did not move. I counted my breaths. 1 to 10, 10 to 20. My chest ached. A dull, insistent complaint. But the pills I had taken earlier kept it from closing all the way. When I was sure the guard was gone, I inched backward, careful not to rattle the pallet. I slid out the far side and hudged the wall, moving slower now. Recklessness had nearly cost me everything. The gap in the fence seemed narrower on the way out. By the time I wriggled through, jacket tearing wider, my arms were trembling from more than just exertion. I leaned against the trunk of a tree on the outside of the perimeter and let myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in half an hour. The night felt different out here. Wider. The river's murmur reached me, muted under the distant grind of tires on asphalt. Then I remembered the phone in my pocket. Under the weak cone of a street lamp, I flipped it open and scrolled through the grainy images. Cereal plates. Kettles being loaded. The truck logos. The bill of sale with its insultingly low numbers and that familiar address. It was ugly and blurry and perfect. I thumbed out a text to Elaine with numb fingers, attaching as many photos as the cheap thing would allow. It took so long to send I thought the network had given up, but finally a little check mark appeared. A minute later, her reply buzzed back. "That is more than enough," she wrote. "Undervalued sale to related buyer plus trust to his funeral. But if you can stand it, go to HQ tomorrow. I think he is about to commit one more sin in public." I snapped the phone shut. On the walk back to my car, my legs felt like someone else's, heavy and wooden. By the time I slid behind the wheel, my shirt was stuck to my back with sweat. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the brick silhouette of the cannery in the rearview mirror. I was shaking with exhaustion when I crawled back out under that fence. But in my pocket, my cheap little phone now held something priceless. I was holding the rope I needed to hang him with. I am 69 years old, and that morning I walked back into a building that no longer recognized me. Lawson headquarters rose up at the edge of downtown, all glass and brick and clean lines, our classic logo etched into a stone slab by the entrance. I had stood there with Margaret the day they unveiled it, her hand in mine, the photographer telling us to look proud. We did not have to pretend. Now I pushed through the revolving door in the same clothes I had worn for 2 days straight. I had my good navy suit in a garment bag over my shoulder, but I did not put it on yet. I wanted to look exactly the way Trevor thought of me, tired, rumpled, small. The lobby gleamed. Polished marble floor, potted trees, a water wall burbling behind a row of leather chairs. The receptionist at the front desk was new, maybe 22, sharp bob blazer a size too big. She glanced up, her face closing down the second she saw me. "Good morning," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "I would like to go up to the 6th floor. I left a bottle of heart medication in my desk drawer. I just need 5 minutes to retrieve it." Her hand hovered over the keyboard. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew who I was, or at least who I had been. Then training took over. Her shoulders squared. "I am sorry, sir," she said. "Former personnel are not allowed past the security gates without authorization. If you left any items, you can contact Human Resources to arrange pickup." "I am not asking for my stapler," I said. I am asking for the pills that keep my heart from stopping. Her mouth tightened. Company policy, she said. The words sounded like a life raft she was clinging to. You will need to speak with. The elevator dinged. Lauder spilled into the lobby before the doors even opened. Trevor stepped out flanked by two men in tailored suits, both of them tanned and toothy in that real estate developer way. They carried rolled-up blueprints and glossy folders under their arms. I caught a few words as they emerged. Riverfront condos, artisanal grocery kiosks, historic charm with a modern twist. Of course. Trevor spotted me almost immediately. His stride did not falter, but his smile sharpened. This, I realized, was a gift to him. An unexpected chance to perform. Eid. He boomed, loud enough for his companions, the receptionist and the two security guards by the turnstiles to hear. Look who it is, gentlemen. Our very own, what did HR call it? Former senior advisor. The developers glanced at me, then at him. One of them offered a polite half-nod, the kind you give a janitor you are not sure you should greet. I stood my ground. I came to ask if I could retrieve my heart medication from my old desk. I said, 5 minutes. That is all. Trevor clucked his tongue and turned to the developers' stage, whispering as if I were not 3 feet away. This is exactly what I was telling you about, he said. The transition issues Ed has been struggling with, let us call it cognitive decline. It has been hard on everyone. We are doing our best to manage with compassion. Lies slid off his tongue like oil. I am not struggling with anything but your arrogance, I said quietly. He ignored me, eyes on his audience. He keeps forgetting he does not work here anymore, he continued. Shows up places he should not be. It is sad, really. The receptionist stared fixedly at her screen. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. A couple of employees near the coffee stand pretended to be fascinated by their phones. Trevor, I said, louder now. Can I at least get my heart pills? He turned back to me, and for a moment the polished mask slipped a fraction, revealing the boy who used to sulk on the factory tours. Then he smiled again, wider. You need a favor from me, he asked. After the scene you made at the hotel. After the rumors you have been spreading about me and Lena. He shook his head in mock disappointment. You are not exactly in a position to ask for things, Ed. He chewed his gum thoughtfully, then did something so petty, so deliberate, that even I needed a second to process it. He took the gum out of his mouth and, without breaking eye contact, let it fall. Not onto the floor, onto the toe of my boot. It landed with a soft, obscene plop, a gray wad on worn leather. A hush dropped over the lobby. Oops, Trevor said lightly. I made a mess. You know how much I hate a messy lobby. He pointed at my shoe. Clean that up, and maybe I will think about letting someone grab your little pills. Show me you still know your place. The developers watched, interest piqued. One of them murmured something about old school management styles. Tone uneasy. The receptionist's fingers froze above her keyboard. The guards looked away, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the far wall. Heat flooded my face. My first instinct was pure, animal, drive my fist into his jaw, feel bone give under my knuckles. I saw myself doing it, saw him stumble backward, saw the gum smear across the marble instead. I wanted that so badly my hands trembled. If I punch him now, everything Elaine is setting up dies with me, a calmer voice inside said. He calls the cops, he slaps a restraining order on you, he plays the victim. You lose the board, you lose the trust. You lose. My heart hammered. Not from fear this time, but from holding back. Slowly, I bent my knees. The marble was cold against them as I knelt. I could feel every eye in the room on my back. Even the water wall seemed to hold its breath. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my handkerchief, white cotton, frayed at the edges, and wrapped it around the gum, wiping it carefully off the leather. On my knees, I looked up at him just long enough to memorize his expression. The lazy triumph, the way his lip curled. I wanted to remember that face when he realized the floor had disappeared under him. Look at that, Trevor said, his voice bright with satisfaction. The old mascot still knows how to fetch. One of the developers shifted, clearing his throat. Under his breath, not as quiet as he thought, he muttered to his partner. Is he really talking to his stepfather like that? In public. Good, I thought. Let them see. Let them wonder what kind of man they are about to trust with millions. I stood up, folding the handkerchief over the gum. My knees popped as I straightened. I tucked the soiled cloth back into my pocket. It felt like a little bundle of poison I meant to keep, a reminder. Are we done? I asked. Trevor waved a hand dismissively. Get out of here, Ed, he said, before I have security escort you out again. You are not family, you are a remnant. A relic we kept around so the brand looked folksy. Do not confuse nostalgia with necessity. You will regret this, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not make a scene. I just stated it like a weather report. He laughed. The only thing I regret, he said, turning back to his guests, is not doing this sooner. As I walked toward the doors, I caught a glimpse of Susan from accounting at the mezzanine railing, watching with a hand over her mouth. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw anger there, and something like hope. Outside, the air felt sharper, like it had more teeth. I walked to a bench by the edge of the plaza and sat down, my legs suddenly weak. My hands shook as I unzipped the garment bag and pulled out my navy suit. Right there under the bare branches of a city tree, I changed. Off came the rumpled shirt, the tired slacks. On went the suit Margaret had insisted I buy when the company got big enough that I had to attend investor meetings. I buttoned the jacket, smoothed the lapels. The fabric still held a faint ghost of her perfume. Next, the shoes. I took a small tin of polish from my pocket. Bought at the same store as the burner phone, and a rag. I worked the wax into the leather in small, steady circles. Every scuff, every dull spot disappeared under my fingers. The act of polishing felt almost ceremonial, like sharpening a blade. By the time I was done, the old man who had knelt on the marble floor was gone. In his place sat someone I had not seen in a while, the man who negotiated freight contracts and told banks. No. The man who had stood next to Margaret under those same etched letters and knew he belonged there. My flip phone buzzed in my pocket. Elaine's message was short. Emergency injunction granted. Board meeting at 9. They think it is to approve cannery sale. Come to back entrance. Time to stop crawling. I stood up, slid the phone away, and picked up my garment bag. The same security guards who had looked past me an hour earlier barely glanced at me when I came around the side of the building toward the service entrance. A woman in a dark suit, one of Elaine's associates, held the door for me without a word. This time when I crossed that lobby, no one stopped me. And I was not the one who needed to worry about getting escorted out. I am 69 years old, and when the executive elevator doors slid shut around us, I could feel the whole building holding its breath. Elaine stood beside me, small and sharp in her dark suit. Her leather briefcase clamped in one hand. 4 of her associates filled the remaining space, black ties, calm eyes, the kind of people who did their fighting on paper and still managed to leave bruises. The panel beside the doors blinked red when I pressed the button for the 40th floor. Access restricted. It flashed, as if I were some stranger trying to sneak in. Elaine snorted softly, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a little gray device that looked like a garage door opener. Installer's override, she said under her breath, and never thinks to change the things he did not install himself. She pressed a sequence on the keypad. The red light blinked, then turned a steady green. The elevator hummed to life, carrying us up through the guts of the company I had built level by level. At 30, my hands were sweating. At 35, my jaw ached from clenching it. By the time the display hit 40, everything inside me had gone very still. Through the frosted glass of the boardroom doors, we could hear him before we saw him. The cannery site is an underperforming asset. Trevor's voice floated out, smooth and confident. By unlocking the real estate value, we can pivot into higher margin ventures. Picture it: riverfront condos, artisanal grocery kiosks, a Lawson-branded food hall. The heritage story becomes an experience, not just a product. Lena's laugh followed, high and brittle. A projector hummed. Paper rustled. Someone cleared a throat. I pushed the doors open. The room fell silent so fast it was like someone had hit a switch. A dozen heads turned. The big screen at the far end froze on an image of our cannery turned into a playground for people who had never known the smell of boiling tomatoes. At the head of the table, Trevor stood with a laser pointer in his hand, mid-gesture. For a beat, he just stared at me, mouth slightly open. I watched the disbelief flicker across his face, then the anger, then the calculation. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped, voice cracking just enough for the people closest to him to hear. Then, louder, "Security." No one moved. "Security!" He barked again. Get in here right now. Elaine stepped past me, calm as if she were walking into a Sunday brunch. She set her briefcase on the table with a solid thump and slid a stapled packet toward the nearest director. Emergency injunction order, she said. Signed by Judge Holloway at 8:27 this morning. Any attempt to remove Mr. Lawson from this meeting or interfere with his exercise of voting rights will be considered obstruction. The directors glanced at the papers, at me, at Trevor. The two men in sleek suits at Trevor's right, the developers, shifted uneasily in their chairs, instinctively inching their folders away from the blast radius. "Who are you?" one of them asked. "Elaine Park, counsel for the Lawson Heritage Voting Trust," she answered. "And for the man who actually controls this company." Trevor laughed, a sharp, desperate sound. "He controls nothing," he said. "He is a former employee, a confused old man. This meeting is for current leadership and our partners. Get out, Ed. Before I have you removed." I pulled out a chair directly opposite him and sat down. I unbuttoned my jacket, rested my hands on the varnished wood. My reflection stared back at me from its surface, older, lined, but steady. "I am not going anywhere," I said. "And you will want to hear this, Trevor. Trust me." He opened his mouth to shout again, but one of the older board members, George, who had been with us since the early days when his desk was a card table, cleared his throat. "I think," George said carefully, "that given the injunction and Mr. Lawson's history here, we should at least listen. For the record." You could almost see the developers do the math. Lawsuits were expensive. Heritage battles got messy. They began quietly closing their folders. I reached into my leather folio, the one I had bought myself years ago and which, unlike my other belongings, had not yet passed through Trevor's hands, and pulled out a stack of glossy prints. Grainy, yes, but clear enough. One by one I laid them out like cards in a hand I knew would beat his. "This," I said, sliding the first photo down the table, "is our original copper kettle set. Appraised at $200,000 for insurance purposes last year. Here it is being loaded, at 2 in the morning, onto a truck that does not belong to Lawson Heritage Foods." A few chairs scraped as people leaned forward. In the photo, under harsh orange yard lights, the kettles hung from chains, dwarfed but still unmistakable. "This," I said, "another photo, is the serial number plate on our manual labeler. Here are the conveyors, the tour signage. The equipment we use in every piece of heritage marketing you have approved for the last 10 years. The director's eyes tracked the pictures like they were watching a slow-motion accident. "And this," I finished, sliding the photocopied bill of sale into place, "is the manifest for their sale. 10 pages of equipment, all classified as obsolete, sold for less than scrap value. To Riverfront Revital LLC. Elaine tapped the buyer address with her pen, which, as it happens, is registered to a managing partner, whose mailing address matches Mrs. Kane's former lifestyle studio, she said, and includes a consultancy fee payable to T. Kane upon completion of the condo development. Silence. Then low, disbelieving murmurs. "You are calling this modernization," I said to Trevor. "But on paper, it looks a lot like looting." He snatched up the bill of sale, skimmed it, his face blanching, then flushing. "You had no right to go in there," he spat. "You cannot prove any of this is. You signed it." I cut in. "Right there at the bottom, in blue ink. Left-handed loop on the K like you always do. You might as well have written 'I am stealing' in the memo line." Elaine slid another document onto the pile, heavier, stamped and tabbed. "And this," she said, her voice almost gentle now, like she was soothing a skittish animal before putting it down, "is the Heritage Voting Trust Agreement. The actual corporate foundation of Lawson Heritage Foods. Since you seem to have mislaid your copy, why do you not read Section 17 aloud for us, Mr. Kane?" He stared at her like she had grown horns. "I am not doing your little—" "Read it?" I said quietly. "Out loud, for the minutes." His hands shook as he flipped to the marked page. His eyes flicked back and forth, lips moving silently. When he realized what he was looking at, his shoulders sagged. "No," he whispered. "Read," Elaine repeated. He swallowed. "Upon the death of Margaret Lawson," he began, voice thin, "all class of voting shares held in her name shall transfer to the Lawson Heritage Voting Trust. The sole trustee." He faltered, glanced at me. "Go on," I said. The sole trustee shall be Edward Lawson, with exclusive authority to exercise 55% of all corporate voting rights, including veto over asset disposals exceeding $1 million in unilateral power to remove any executive officer for cause. His voice cracked on the last words. The room was dead quiet. Even the projector seemed to hum more softly. "You confused getting paid with being in charge, Mr. Kane," Elaine said. "That is not how this was built." Trevor dropped the papers as if they burned. "This is a forgery," he blurted. "He must have. He is manipulating. Mom would never." "Original filing date, 1996, Elaine said, flipping to the signature page. "Notarized. Filed with the state. Your mother's signature in ink. Mine as witness. If this is a forgery, the state bar will be very interested to know how I pulled it off 27 years ago." Lena, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly lurched forward, hand outstretched toward the documents. "Give me that," she snapped. "You cannot just." One of Elaine's associates stepped between them, catching Lena's wrist in a firm but polite grip. "I would not touch those, ma'am," he said. "Tampering with legal evidence is a felony. You already have enough problems. You cannot take our phones." Lena blurted instead, her voice rising as if on a different track entirely. "Our cards. Our keys. That is our life." I turned to her, surprised at how flat my own voice sounded. "You took my life and threw it on the curb," I said. "Consider this recycling." One of the developers pushed back his chair. "I think," he murmured to Trevor, "we should probably suspend these discussions until you sort out your internal issues." He and his partner began sliding their folders into briefcases with the quiet efficiency of men who had walked away from bad deals before. By the time Trevor realized what was happening, they were already at the door. "Wet," he called after them. "This is just a misunderstanding. We can." The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded, to me, like the lid of a coffin. I stood, as trustee holding 55% of the voting shares. I said, "I move that all pending asset sales to Riverfront Revital LLC and any other related parties be canceled immediately, pending independent valuation and review." George raised his hand. "Seconded," he said, his voice steady. "All in favor?" I asked. Hands went up around the table. Even if they had not, it would not have mattered. 55% sat in my chest pocket, wrapped in legalese and Margaret's faded ink. But seeing those hands, old guard new hires, even a couple of the tech boys who had once orbited Trevor's ego, meant something. "Motion carried," I said. "Effective now." Trevor stared at me, breathing hard, color blotchy high on his cheeks. "You cannot do this," he hissed. "I am the CEO. I have a contract." "You were the CEO," I said softly. Past tense. I turned to the board. "Next motion," I said. "That Trevor Kane be removed from the position of Chief Executive Officer for cause, namely, breach of fiduciary duty, self-dealing, and intentional harm to corporate assets and brand. Effective immediately. That any advisory or creative positions held by Lena Kane be terminated as well with no severance, pending further legal review." My own hand was already raised. George's followed. Then Martha from operations. One by one, the hands went up. Some high, some hesitating, but they went. Trevor's eyes swept the table wild. He saw no rescue there. "Motion carries," I said. The words felt heavier than any sermon I had ever heard. At a nod from Elaine, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it was not Trevor's goons in tactical vests who came in. It was a different team in dark suits, badges on their belts. Private security contracted by the company, not by him. "Mr. Kane, Mrs. Kane," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." "This is my building," Trevor protested, backing away. "You cannot just throw me out of my own." "It is not your building," I said. "It never was." He looked at me, eyes bright with something that might have been tears or rage or both. "Dad," he said, the word ripping out of him like he had swallowed glass. It was the first time he had called me that in over a decade. "Dad, please, you cannot do this. We are family." I met his gaze and felt, under the anger, a tired sorrow. For Margaret. For the boy he might once have been. "I loved you because she loved you," I said. "But love does not excuse theft." I nodded to the security men. "Collect their company property," I added. "Phones, cards, access badges, car keys." Lana clutched her handbag to her chest. "No," she said. "You cannot." "Mum." One of the guards said, "Anything issued by Lawson Heritage Food stays. You will be given a list of personal items for later retrieval." She fumbled, hands shaking, pulling out a sleek smartphone with our carrier sticker on the back, a black credit card with the company logo. The guard set them on the table in a little pile of severed privilege. "And the jewelry," I said quietly. She froze. "What?" "The pearl pendant," I said, holding out my hand. "And the ring. They were never yours." Her eyes darted to the faces around the table. There was no help there. Slowly, like every ounce of reluctance had to be peeled from her bones, she reached up and unclasped the necklace. The pearls slid into my palm, cool and familiar. Then, with a little sob, she tugged at the ring, twisting it off her finger. The weight of my mother's wedding band in my hand nearly buckled my knees. I slipped both pieces into my inner pocket, over my heart. As the guards led them toward the door, Trevor twisted in their grip, looking back at me one last time. "This is not over," he choked. "You cannot just erase me." "I am not erasing you," I said. "You did that yourself." The door closed behind them. Their voices, her protests, his ragged breathing, faded down the hall. I turned to the window. From 40 floors up, the city looked small. Cars like toys. People like moving dots. Down on the sidewalk in front of our building, 2 figures emerged a few minutes later, flanked by security. Even from that distance I knew their posture. Lost, angry, untethered. No ride, no keys, no money that was truly theirs. For a long moment I watched them stand there, spinning in place like they were waiting for context to load. Then a bus roared past, blocking them from view. Behind me, the boardroom buzzed with low conversation. Relief, fear, the beginnings of new alliances. Elaine's pen scratched over paper. Someone coughed. We had cut out the tumor. The body was still weak. There was a lot of healing left to do. But for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt something like balance return to the room. Margaret's son had just been destroyed in the one arena he cared about. Not by shouting, not by fists. By the fine print he had never bothered to read and the people he had underestimated. He had done it to himself. I straightened my jacket, pulled my shoulders back, and turned away from the window. There was one more room I needed to visit. The CEO office. It was time to see exactly what kind of mess he had left in the chair he had stolen. I am 69 years old, and when I opened the door to the CEO office, it looked exactly like what it had been for the last few months. A stage set for a boy playing dress-up. The blinds were half closed, letting in slats of late afternoon light that fell across the chaos. Trend boards leaned against the walls, covered in sticky notes and phrases like "disrupt legacy" and "go digital or die." A half-empty espresso cup sat on a stack of unpaid invoices, leaving a brown ring. Empty energy drink cans were lined up along the windowsill like trophies. My old desk, the solid oak one we had moved up from the original plant, was buried under glossy magazines about crypto, tech startups, and a hardcover book called "Move Fast and Break Things." He had certainly managed the second part. I walked around behind the desk and ran my hand along the scarred edge, the place where I had once caught it with a pallet jack, cursed and sanded the splinter out myself. Trevor had never noticed that mark. He did not know enough about wood to see where it had been injured and repaired. In the corner, propped against the wall, was a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. The same brand as the one he had dropped at my feet in the hotel lounge. I picked one up, unfolded it, and set it on the desk. It seemed only fair. I started with the crypto magazines. Dozens of them, their covers shouting about coins and chains and revolutions that existed mostly on screens. Then the "Disrupt or Die" posters, the glossy mock-ups for riverfront lofts, the mock-branded hoodies he had made for his innovation team. All of it went into the box, each thump of paper on cardboard a little exorcism. When the surface of the desk was clear, the grain shone through again, warm and familiar. I placed my hand flat on it for a moment, feeling the solidness, the weight. Then I picked up the phone and hit the button for human resources. "Alice," I said when she answered. Her voice sounded wary, like someone answering a call from an unknown number during dinner. "It is Ed." There was a beat, then a sharp inhale. "Mr. Lawson," she said. Are you back?" "I am," I said. "And I need a favor." "Anything," she replied, and I believed her. "I want a list of every employee who has been terminated in the last 2 weeks," I said. "Drivers, office staff, plant floor, security, everyone." Especially anyone Trevor let go. I heard her typing. I have it right here, she said after a moment. 35 names. Some are marked performance issues, some restructuring. All 35, I said. Today. Tell them their jobs are reinstated with full seniority, and as an apology for the whiplash, give them a 5% raise, effective immediately. There was a stunned silence on the line. Then, very softly, all 35, even the ones he said were problems. Especially those, I replied. Tell them their jobs and their dignity are back. If anyone does not want to return, we will offer severance on top. No one gets punished for saying no. I could hear the smile in her voice when she answered. Yes, sir, she said. I will start now. I hung up and dialed the plant. Carl, I said when he picked up. In the background I could hear the echoing clank of the cannery, a sound that had underscored half my life. It is Ed, Mr. Lawson, he said. Am I in trouble? No, I told him. You are in luck. The equipment transfers. Cancelled. Effective immediately. Nothing else leaves that yard without my signature. He let out a breath that sounded like it had been stuck in his chest for a week. Does this mean the kettles stay, Mr. Lawson? He asked. They were here before any of us, I said. And they will be here when we are gone. We will modernize where it makes sense, but not by burning our own museum to the ground. I will tell the crew, he said, and I knew a cheer would go up in that break room that would mean more to me than any shareholder applause. When I hung up, the office was quiet. Traffic murmured 40 floors below. The water in the little fountain on the credenza trickled pointlessly over polished stones. I reached into my inner pocket and drew out the pearl pendant and my mother's ring. The afternoon light caught on the pearl's soft sheen, on the worn gold of the band. 2 women's promises, warmed by my palm. I stood by the window, looking out at the city. From up here, it all blurred into movement and light. Somewhere down there, Trevor was pacing a sidewalk, phone less, card less, wondering how it had all slipped through his fingers. Lena was likely already composing a story where they were the victims. My prepaid phone buzzed in my other pocket. An unknown local number. I did not have to guess long who it was. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the green button. Some stubborn, hurting part of me wanted to hear his voice, to see if there was any remorse in it, to see if, stripped of titles and toys, he had any idea what he had done. Then I thought of the motel, the declined card at the pharmacy, the gum on my boot, Margaret's cardigan on Lena's shoulders, my mother's ring on fingers that had never known a day of honest work. I thought of my people, 35 of them, who had gone home thinking they were useless because a boy with a title said so. I hit block instead. The call went silent. The phone felt lighter. Never mistake quiet for weak. The loudest person in the room is not always the one holding the pen that signs the checks. I had been quiet for a long time, and Trevor had mistaken that for surrender. Greed makes people stupid. He thought titles and black turtlenecks and buzzwords made him a leader. He forgot that leadership is about taking care of people, not extracting value from them. Family, I had learned the hard way, is not whoever shares your last name on paper. It is whoever stands with you when the lights go out and the money is gone. Susan watching me from the mezzanine, Alice almost crying with relief on the phone, Carl ready to go to war for a set of old kettles. That was family. Margaret, in the way she had thought ahead, trusting me with the rudder. That was family. As for karma, well, it is slow but it is thorough. He mocked my age, my heart, my grief. In the end, it was his own heart, the hollow place where decency should have been, that took him down. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine, just for a second, that Margaret was standing beside me, hand on my arm the way she used to when she was about to tell me something hard. You did what I could not. I could almost hear her say. You drew the line I was too soft to draw. You protected him as long as you could. Then you protected everyone else from him. I loved him. I told the empty room. But I could not let him burn it all. I put the necklace and the ring back in my pocket and picked up the cardboard box of Trevor's junk. On my way out, the night cleaning crew was just arriving. Maria, who had been vacuuming our floors since the logo on the rug still had wet paint, looked up and froze when she saw me. Mr. Lawson, she said, eyes wide. Then, tentatively, you are back. I am back, I said. She smiled wide and genuine. Good, she said. The trash was getting out of hand. I laughed, a short, surprised bark that felt like it came from somewhere deep I had not accessed in days. We took some of it out today, I said. You and your crew can handle the rest. As I walked down the hallway, past the framed awards and magazine covers, I felt lighter than I had in years. Tired, yes. Sad, undeniably. I had lost my wife, and with her, the version of her son I had always hoped might appear someday. That fantasy was buried now, right alongside her. But I had saved the house she had asked me to protect. The company, the people, the story in every jar on every shelf. I had kept my promise. Now, if you have listened this far, you might be thinking about your own promises. Your own lines in the sand. If your own child or stepchild tried to steal your home or your business, would you be willing to take legal action against them like I did? Or would you walk away and hope they changed? Do you think blood alone makes someone family? Or do actions matter more than DNA and titles? Has anyone ever tried to push you out, control your money, or take over your decisions because of your age? Have you ever felt that somebody was only kind to you because they were waiting for an inheritance or a promotion? I am an old man, but I read what people write. I would like to know. If you believe elders deserve respect, not exploitation, if you think stories like this should be heard, then please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and tell me what you would have done in my place, especially with that final phone call. Would you have answered? Or would you have blocked it like I did? There are more stories like mine out there. Stories of elder justice, family betrayal, and well-earned revenge. Stick around. You might hear something that sounds a little too familiar.